Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. If you've subscribed for more stories, enjoy the ride now. Lieutenant Marcus Rivera had drawn some questionable assignments in his 8 years of coalition service, but babysitting alien royalty while they toured human space stations ranked somewhere between tedious and please let me transfer to combat duty. The luxury starship Serenity's edge hummed around him with the kind of subdued elegance that made him acutely aware of his standard-issue uniform and the fact that he'd grabbed the wrong socks this morning. "Lieutenant Rivera," came a melodic voice from behind him, carrying those subtle harmonics that mark celestial vocal cords. "I don't suppose you could help me with something terribly important?" Marcus turned to find Princess Lydia Vexhara of the Celestial Dominion standing in the corridor wearing what he was pretty sure were maintenance coveralls and holding a plasma wrench that definitely hadn't come from the ship's standard toolkit. Her pointed ears were slightly flushed, apparently a celestial sign of excitement. And her violet eyes sparkled with the kind of mischief that made diplomatic protection officers develop stress-related health problems. "Your Highness," Marcus said carefully, "please tell me you didn't break into the engineering section again." "I didn't break in," Princess Lydia said with wounded dignity. "I was invited. Chief Engineer Patterson was explaining how your quantum drives maintain stable wormhole matrices, and I offered to help calibrate the harmonic resonators." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Princess, those systems are classified, dangerous, and specifically designed so that unauthorized personnel can't." He stopped, processing her words. "Wait. Patterson invited you into engineering?" He seemed delighted to have someone who understood the mathematical principles behind quantum fold manipulation. "Humans are surprisingly modest about your technological achievements." She held up the plasma wrench. "Did you know this tool can reconfigure subatomic particle streams while maintaining temporal stability? It's brilliant. It's also capable of accidentally creating micro-black holes if misused. Only if you don't account for Heisenberg compensation in the quantum matrix." Princess Lydia waved dismissively. "Really, Lieutenant, your species develops magnificent technology and then treats it like it might explode if you look at it wrong." "Because it might explode if we look at it wrong." Princess Lydia laughed, a sound like crystal chimes caught in solar wind. "You humans have such charming paranoia. On Celestia, we teach children to manipulate quantum fields as part of basic education. On Celestia, children are telepathically linked to safety monitoring systems from birth," Marcus pointed out. "Human children are lucky if they remember to tie their shoes." "True, but they're much more creative. Do you know that Chief Patterson suggested 17 different modifications to our Royal Fleet's drive systems? 17. Our best engineers have been using the same designs for 3 centuries. Marcus began walking toward the engineering section, Princess Lydia falling into step beside him with the kind of easy grace that made him hyper-aware of his own pedestrian gait. "Your Highness, while I'm sure Chief Patterson appreciates your interest, we should probably return you to the diplomatic quarters before Chancellor Korith notices you're missing. Chancellor Korith believes I'm in my stateroom practicing ceremonial meditation poses." Princess Lydia's ears twitched with amusement. "He thinks Princess should be seen and not heard, preferably while standing very still and looking decorative. And instead you're dismantling quantum drives. I'm learning about human engineering philosophy. It's completely different from ours. Celestials design technology to be perfect and unchanging. Humans design it to be improved and adapted. It's fascinating." They'd reached engineering, where Chief Patterson was indeed waiting with the patient expression of someone who'd found a kindred spirit in mechanical curiosity. "Lieutenant. Her Highness was just explaining how celestial drives use consciousness-guided navigation. Did you know they can literally think their way across the galaxy?" "I did not know that," Marcus said weakly. "It's perfectly safe," Princess Lydia assured him. "Well, mostly safe. There was that unfortunate incident with my cousin who tried to navigate while having nightmares about being chased by geometric shapes, but we don't talk about that." "Your cousin accidentally navigated into a mathematical concept?" "For 3 weeks. He's fine now, though he does occasionally exist in theoretical space when he's stressed. Princess Lydia handed the plasma wrench back to Patterson. But that's why we have safety protocols. Marcus stared at her. Your cousin spent 3 weeks existing as a mathematical theory. Abstract geometry, technically. Very advanced abstract geometry, she corrected. He says it was quite peaceful once he got used to being a sentient equation. This is why I stick to conventional propulsion, Patterson muttered. None of my relatives have ever been accidentally transformed into calculus. Princess Lydia beamed at him. That's the wonderful thing about human engineering. Everything is so delightfully concrete and explainable. When something goes wrong, you can point to the specific broken part instead of investigating whether someone had inappropriate thoughts about hyperdimensional manifolds. They spent the next 20 minutes discussing the philosophical differences between consciousness-based technology and mechanical engineering, during which Marcus discovered that Princess Lydia had a genuine talent for making complex theoretical concepts sound like dinner conversation, while Patterson treated every one of her questions like a personal challenge to explain human ingenuity. The real difference, Princess Lydia said thoughtfully, is that celestial technology assumes perfection, while human technology assumes things will go wrong and plans accordingly. It's a much more practical approach to problem solving. Humans are good at adapting, Marcus agreed. We're not perfect, but we're persistent. And modest, she added, giving him a look that made him slightly uncomfortable. Chief Patterson has spent an hour explaining revolutionary advances in quantum mechanics while insisting they're nothing special, just basic engineering. Because they are basic engineering, Patterson protested. Any first-year student could. Chief Patterson, Princess Lydia interrupted gently, you've developed technology that allows matter to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously while maintaining causal consistency. On my world, that would be considered divine intervention. It's just quantum mechanics, Patterson said, but he was clearly pleased by the compliment. Princess Lydia turned to Marcus. How do humans handle courtship with such modest attitudes? Do you just assume romantic feelings are nothing special, just basic emotional engineering? Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. I wouldn't know. I'm not exactly an expert on human courtship. Really? But you're so confident about everything else. How do humans typically express romantic interest? I wouldn't say I'm confident about anything, Your Highness. I just try to do my job without causing international incidents. Galactic incidents, technically, she corrected with a grin. And you haven't answered my question. Patterson, sensing an opportunity to escape what was becoming an increasingly personal conversation, began backing toward his workstation. I should probably get back to those harmonic resonators. Chief, wait, Marcus said desperately, but Patterson had already disappeared behind a quantum processor array with the speed of someone who perfected the art of avoiding awkward conversations. Princess Lydia was watching Marcus with obvious amusement. So, human courtship rituals. I don't know if I'd call them rituals, Marcus said, acutely aware that they were now alone in engineering with only the hum of exotic matter converters for company. Humans are pretty straightforward about these things. We just ask. Ask what? Whether someone wants to spend time together. Go to dinner. Get to know each other. Marcus found himself relaxing slightly. This was safer ground than quantum mechanics. It's not complicated. No mathematical equations or telepathic compatibility tests. How wonderfully simple. Princess Lydia tilted her head, considering this. So if a human wanted to express the highest level of romantic commitment, they would just ask? Well, eventually. Marriage proposals are usually the end result of a longer process. Marcus grinned. Though I suppose if someone was really confident, they might skip straight to, will you marry me, and hope for the best. Demonstrate. What? Show me how a human would make such a proposal. Princess Lydia's eyes were bright with curiosity and something that might have been challenge. I want to understand the cultural context. Marcus felt like he'd walked into a trap, but wasn't sure how. Your Highness, I don't think. Please. For diplomatic understanding. She was looking at him with those violet eyes, her expression open and genuinely interested, and Marcus realized that refusing would seem churlish. Besides, it was just a demonstration. Educational. Completely harmless. Fine, he said, taking a breath. A human might say something like. He paused, suddenly feeling ridiculous. This is silly. It's anthropologically fascinating, Princess Lydia corrected. Continue. Marcus looked at her, really looked. Princess Lydia Vexhara, heir to the Celestial Dominion, one of the most powerful people in known space, standing in a human engineering bay wearing borrowed coveralls and waiting expectantly for him to demonstrate proposal techniques like they were discussing engine maintenance. The absurdity of it struck him all at once, and he started laughing. What's amusing, she asked, but she was starting to smile too. This whole situation. A coalition lieutenant giving romantic advice to alien royalty while standing next to a quantum drive that could accidentally erase us from existence if we sneeze wrong. Marcus shook his head. My life has gotten very strange. Strange can be good, Princess Lydia said softly. Strange is interesting. Something in her tone made Marcus look at her more carefully. There was something vulnerable in her expression, something almost wistful that didn't match her usual confident demeanor. All right, he said, decision made. Human marriage proposal, demonstrated for diplomatic purposes. He straightened, adopting a mock-serious expression. Princess Lydia Vexhara of the Celestial Dominion, would you do me the tremendous honor of marrying me? He'd expected her to laugh. He'd expected her to make some comment about human customs or ask follow-up questions about wedding traditions. He hadn't expected her to go completely still, her eyes widening with something that looked dangerously close to longing. I wish, she whispered, so quietly he almost didn't hear her. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Not, that's interesting, or, how curious, or any of the dozen diplomatic responses he might have expected. Just, I wish, delivered with the kind of quiet sincerity that suggested she meant it. Marcus felt the universe tilt around them. The engineering bay's quantum drives hummed their complex harmonies, exotic matter converters painted rainbow patterns across the walls, and Princess Lydia of the Celestial Dominion stood 3 feet away looking like she just revealed the most important secret in the galaxy. Your Highness, Marcus began, not sure what he was going to say. Lieutenant Rivera. Chancellor Coritha's voice cut through the moment like a plasma blade through atmosphere. Princess Lydia, your presence is required in the diplomatic quarters immediately. Princess Lydia blinked, and just like that, her usual composure slammed back into place like armor. Of course, Chancellor. I was just learning about human technology. Chancellor Korith, a tall celestial with silver-streaked hair and the expression of someone who'd spent decades managing royal crises, looked between them with obvious suspicion. Indeed. Your Highness, the Emperor has sent new instructions regarding your courtship schedule. My what? Princess Lydia's voice carried a sharp note that Marcus had never heard before. The formal presentations from your suitors have been accelerated. The Zephyrian delegation arrives tomorrow, followed by the synthetic intelligence representatives and the human corporate consortium. Your father believes it's time to finalize your marriage arrangements. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Marriage arrangements. Of course. Princess Lydia was heir to a galactic empire. She didn't get to choose her own relationships any more than she got to choose her own schedule. I see, Princess Lydia said quietly. And does my opinion factor into these arrangements? Your happiness is, naturally, of paramount concern, Chancellor Korith said in the tone of someone delivering a prepared statement. However, the strategic value of your union to the Dominion must be the primary consideration. Princess Lydia nodded, her expression carefully neutral. Of course. Strategic value. She glanced at Marcus, and he saw something flash in her eyes that might have been regret. Thank you for the cultural lesson, Lieutenant. It was educational. She followed Chancellor Korith out of engineering, leaving Marcus alone with the quantum drives and the growing realization that his joke proposal might have been the most serious conversation of his life. And he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Marcus stared at the formal summons on his data pad, reading it for the third time as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less ominous. Lieutenant Rivera will report to Chancellor Korith's quarters at 0800 hours for diplomatic consultation regarding cultural protocol compliance. The timestamp showed 0759. He'd spent the night wondering if Princess Lydia's "I wish" had been a polite deflection, genuine emotion, or some kind of celestial diplomatic response he didn't understand. Now, apparently, he was about to find out which interpretation would get him court-martialed. Chancellor Korith's temporary quarters aboard Serenity's Edge had been transformed into something resembling a mobile command center, complete with holographic displays showing what Marcus assumed were strategic assessments of various star systems. The Chancellor himself sat behind a desk that seemed to have materialized from celestial space. All flowing curves and surfaces that reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Lieutenant Rivera, Chancellor Korith said without looking up from his work. Please, sit. Marcus sat in a chair that had definitely not been there when he'd entered the room. Celestial technology apparently included furniture that responded to social cues, which was either impressive or deeply unsettling. Do you understand why you're here, Lieutenant? I'm assuming it has something to do with yesterday's conversation with Princess Lydia, Marcus said carefully. Indeed. Chancellor Korith finally looked at him, and Marcus was struck by how tired the man looked. Lieutenant, in your cultural exchange with Her Highness, did you at any point make what might be construed as a formal proposal of marriage? Marcus felt his stomach drop. It was a demonstration, sir. She asked about human courtship customs, and I was explaining. The specific words, Lieutenant. Did you or did you not ask Princess Lydia to marry you? Yes. But it was educational. A cultural example. Chancellor Korith leaned back in his chair, and Marcus heard him sigh. Lieutenant Rivera, I need you to understand something about celestial law and custom. Among our people, marriage proposals carry legal weight regardless of the intent behind them. When made in the presence of witnesses, even artificial witnesses like ships' computer systems, they become formal petitions for courtship. Ships' computer systems count as witnesses. Celestial legal precedent recognizes any intelligence capable of recording and analyzing emotional context. Chancellor Korith gestured at the walls around them. Serenity's Edge has been broadcasting yesterday's conversation throughout the diplomatic channels since this morning. Marcus stared at him. Broadcasting? Princess Lydia's response has been analyzed by 17 different celestial legal scholars, 43 political advisors, and what I can only describe as an alarming number of romantic poets. Chancellor Korith's expression grew grim. The consensus is that her reply constituted acceptance of your courtship petition. She said, I wish. That's not acceptance, that's wistful thinking. In celestial culture, expressions of desire regarding matrimony are considered binding statements of intent when made in response to formal proposals. Chancellor Korith pulled up holographic documents covered in script that made Marcus's eyes water. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You are now officially recognized as a suitor for the hand of Princess Lydia Vexhara, heir to the Celestial Dominion. Marcus felt like someone had replaced his blood with liquid nitrogen. There has to be some kind of mistake. The only mistake was not understanding the cultural implications of your demonstration. Chancellor Korith's tone was clinical, but not unkind. However, this creates complications. What kind of complications? The kind that involve 17 star systems, 3 galactic trade agreements, and a military alliance that keeps the Outer Rim from devolving into open warfare. Chancellor Korith manipulated the holographic display, showing star maps covered in political and economic indicators. Princess Lydia's marriage is not a personal matter, Lieutenant. It is a strategic necessity. Marcus studied the displays, trying to process the implications. And now I'm officially part of that strategic equation. You are now officially competing with some of the most powerful entities in known space for the privilege of fundamentally altering galactic politics. Chancellor Korath highlighted several markers on the star map. Your competition includes Warlord Zethrak of the Zephyrian Empire, Synthesis Unit Omega-7 of the Collective Intelligence Network, and Director Harrison Webb of the Human Corporate Consortium. A warlord, an artificial intelligence, and a corporate executive walk into a marriage proposal, Marcus muttered. This sounds like the setup for a very expensive joke. It's no joke, Lieutenant. Each of these suitors represents massive political and economic advantages for the Dominion. Warlord Zethrak offers military alliance with the most powerful warrior culture in the galaxy. Synthesis Unit Omega-7 provides access to computational resources that could revolutionize celestial technology. Director Webb brings trade agreements worth more than some planet's entire gross domestic product. Marcus looked at the display showing his own profile next to these titans of galactic politics. His achievements included exemplary service record, basic quantum mechanics training, and has never started an interplanetary war. It was not an impressive comparison. What do I bring to this competition? He asked. An excellent question. Chancellor Korath studied him with calculating eyes. What do you bring, Lieutenant Rivera? Marcus thought about it seriously. Honestly? Not much. I'm a decent soldier, I can fix basic ship systems, and I know 17 different ways to prepare military rations so they're almost edible. And yet Princess Lydia's emotional response to your proposal was more genuine than any reaction she's shown to her other suitors. Chancellor Korath leaned forward. Why do you think that is? Because she wasn't expecting it to be real? Because you treated her like a person instead of a political asset. The Chancellor's expression softened slightly. Lieutenant, I have served the royal family for 30 years. I have watched Princess Lydia grow from a curious child into a brilliant young woman who has never been allowed to make a single important decision about her own life. Every friendship, every interest, every moment of her existence has been carefully managed to maximize her value as a diplomatic tool. Marcus felt something shift in his understanding. And I just talked to her. You explained quantum mechanics like she was a colleague instead of a princess. You laughed with her instead of at her. You answered her questions without calculating the political implications of your responses. Chancellor Korath paused. And when you proposed, even as a joke, you looked at her like she was someone worth choosing rather than someone worth acquiring. Chancellor, I need you to understand that I never intended. Your intentions are irrelevant now. Chancellor Korath stood, and the holographic displays shifted to show formal documents. The courtship period has begun. Princess Lydia's other suitors will arrive within days to present their cases. You will be expected to do the same. Marcus stared at the documents, trying to process what his life had become. How exactly does one compete for the hand of alien royalty? Is there a manual? A training course? A support group for accidentally engaged military personnel? The traditional trials include demonstrations of worthiness, compatibility assessments, and formal presentations before the imperial court. Chancellor Korath seemed almost amused by Marcus's expression. Though I suspect Princess Lydia may modify the traditional format. Modify how? Her Highness has requested that all courtship activities include cultural exchange opportunities and practical applications of theoretical knowledge. The Chancellor's tone suggested he found these requirements unusual. She also insisted that suitors be evaluated on their ability to engage in meaningful conversation about subjects more complex than military strategy or profit margins. Marcus couldn't help but smile. She's going to make them explain quantum mechanics, isn't she? Among other things. Her list of evaluation criteria includes capacity for intellectual curiosity, willingness to question established assumptions, and ability to find humor in complex situations. Chancellor Korath regarded Marcus thoughtfully. Criteria that, coincidentally, seem to favor individuals with your particular personality traits. You think she's rigging the competition in my favor? I think Princess Lydia is finally exercising the first real choice she's ever been allowed to make. Chancellor Korith moved to the door, then paused. Lieutenant, I should warn you that competing for royal courtship involves more than just impressing Princess Lydia. You'll need to prove your worthiness to the Celestial Court, demonstrate your ability to handle the responsibilities of joining the royal family, and convince Emperor Zephan that a human soldier is a suitable match for his heir. Marcus felt the weight of impossible expectations settle on his shoulders. And if I can't? Then Princess Lydia will marry someone chosen for her, and you'll return to your normal duties with an interesting story to tell your grandchildren. Chancellor Koritha's expression grew serious. But if you can, well, Lieutenant, you'll be helping to reshape the political landscape of known space. After the Chancellor left, Marcus sat alone in the impossible furniture, staring at holographic displays that showed the scope of what he'd accidentally gotten himself into. 17 star systems, galactic trade agreements, military alliances that kept entire sectors stable. All potentially affected by whether he could figure out how to compete with warlords and artificial intelligences for the affections of a woman he'd known for exactly 3 days. His comm unit chimed with an incoming message, Lieutenant Rivera, this is Princess Lydia. Would you join me for dinner tonight? I believe we have a great deal to discuss. P.S. I hope you don't mind eating in the Arboretum. I thought it would be nice to have our first official date somewhere with actual growing things instead of endless metal corridors. Marcus stared at the message, then started laughing. Princess Lydia Vexhara, heir to the Celestial Dominion, had just asked him on a date. Their first official date, as if this had become a relationship rather than a diplomatic crisis. He composed his reply, Your Highness, I would be honored. Should I bring anything? Her response came immediately, just yourself. And maybe some of those, almost edible, military rations you mentioned. I'm curious about human field cooking techniques. Marcus shook his head, grinning despite everything. Somehow, in the middle of the most complicated political situation of his career, Princess Lydia was still trying to learn about human culture through practical examples. Maybe he did have something to offer in this competition after all. Even if it was just the ability to make her laugh while explaining how to turn synthetic protein paste into something resembling actual food. The thought occurred to him that if he was going to compete for the hand of alien royalty, he should probably start by figuring out what he actually wanted from this situation. The honest answer was terrifying. He wanted Princess Lydia to be happy, even if that meant losing her to someone who could offer her advantages he never could. But maybe, just maybe, he could offer her something the others couldn't, the experience of being chosen for who she was rather than what she represented. It wasn't much of a competitive advantage, but it was a start. The Imperial flagship sovereigns will materialized in normal space with the kind of dramatic flair that announced the arrival of someone accustomed to reshaping star systems through sheer force of personality. Marcus stood at the observation deck's viewport beside Princess Lydia, watching the massive vessels approach while trying to ignore the fact that her father was about to personally evaluate his worthiness to marry into galactic royalty. He's not as intimidating as he looks, Princess Lydia said softly, though her ears were flattened against her head in what Marcus had learned was a celestial anxiety response. Your Highness, that ship has enough firepower to sterilize a small moon, Marcus observed. How intimidating does he look? Point taken. She glanced at him with something that might have been sympathy. Marcus, I should probably mention that father tends to test people he's considering allowing into the family. What kind of tests? The traditional trials include solving multidimensional tactical problems under telepathic pressure, demonstrating combat worthiness with exotic energy weapons, and proving genetic compatibility through biochemical analysis. Princess Lydia paused. He may also ask you to recite the genealogy of the royal bloodline going back 17 generations. Marcus stared at her. 17 generations. In Celestial and Standard Galactic. With proper pronunciation of all ceremonial titles. Her expression grew apologetic. I did mention that royal courtship was complicated. You mentioned it was strategic. You didn't mention it required memorizing your entire family tree or fighting with weapons that don't exist in human space. To be fair, Warlord Zethrak and Director Webb will face the same challenges. Princess Lydia brightened slightly. Though Synthesis Unit Omega-7 has probably already downloaded the complete historical records and calculated optimal combat algorithms. Great. I'm competing with a walking computer. A very polite walking computer with excellent manners and absolutely no sense of humor. Princess Lydia's tone suggested this was a significant character flaw. During our formal introduction, I asked what it found amusing about consciousness, and it spent 47 minutes explaining the statistical improbabilities of organic neural development. Marcus couldn't help but grin. Did you find that amusing? I found it educational. There's a difference. She looked at him with those violet eyes that had gotten him into this situation in the first place. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Of course. Why are you doing this? Competing for royal courtship, I mean. You could withdraw your petition at any time and return to your normal life. No one would blame you for deciding this is too complicated. Marcus considered the question seriously. Over the past week, he'd asked himself the same thing multiple times. The rational answer was that he should withdraw immediately, before he embarrassed himself in front of galactic dignitaries and potentially damaged human-celestial relations. Honestly, he said finally. Because when you said, I wish, in engineering, you looked like someone who'd never been allowed to wish for anything before. And I realized that if I walked away, you'd end up marrying someone who sees you as a political asset rather than. He trailed off, searching for the right words. Rather than what? Rather than the woman who gets so excited about quantum mechanics that she forgets she's not supposed to disassemble starship engines. Rather than someone who asks thoughtful questions about human culture because she's genuinely curious about how other people live. Marcus met her gaze. Rather than someone worth choosing. Princess Lydia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics he'd never heard before, something deeper than her usual careful diplomatic tone. Marcus, do you understand what you're saying? If Father approves our courtship, if we actually go through with marriage, your consciousness will be linked to mine through biochemical bonding. You'll share my memories, my emotions, my connection to the royal family's collective unconscious. You'll become part of something that's existed for 1,000 years. Will I still be me? Yes, but, more. The bonding process doesn't erase individual identity, but it creates permanent emotional and mental connections that can't be undone. Princess Lydia turned to face him fully. Marcus, once we're bonded, you'll feel everything I feel. When I'm happy, you'll experience that joy. When I'm in pain, you'll share that suffering. When I die, you'll. She paused. The surviving partner usually follows within days. Biochemical bonding creates dependencies that transcend individual consciousness. Marcus absorbed this information, trying to process the implications of literally sharing existence with another person. What about the political responsibilities? If I marry you, I become what, a prince? A duke? Someone important enough that entire star systems depend on my decisions. You become my partner in leadership. The celestial dominion isn't an absolute monarchy, the royal family governs through consensus, guided by the collective wisdom of biochemically bonded partnerships accumulated over centuries. Princess Lydia's expression grew serious. Marcus, you would help shape policies that affect billions of lives across 17 star systems. You'd be responsible for maintaining alliances, mediating disputes between species, making decisions that could prevent or cause interstellar wars. That's terrifying. It should be. Power without fear is power without wisdom. Princess Lydia smiled slightly. But you wouldn't be alone. The bonding process means you'd have access to the accumulated experience of every royal partnership in celestial history. You'd literally think with the wisdom of generations. Before Marcus could respond, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming transmission. Emperor Zephin's face appeared on the main display, a man who looked like an older, more austere version of Princess Lydia, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "Daughter," Emperor Zephin said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had shaped galactic politics for decades. "I trust you are prepared for the formal courtship evaluations." "Yes, father. All of my suitors have agreed to participate in the traditional trials." "Excellent. I confess myself curious about this human who has apparently captured your interest so completely." Emperor Zephin's gaze shifted to Marcus. "Lieutenant Rivera, I look forward to our conversation." "Your Imperial Majesty," Marcus replied, hoping his voice sounded steadier than he felt. "We will begin with the traditional tests tomorrow at dawn. I trust you have prepared." Marcus glanced at Princess Lydia, who was making subtle hand gestures that probably meant something important in celestial body language. "I've studied the available materials, Your Majesty." "Studied?" Emperor Zephin's expression suggested amusement. "Lieutenant, I have reviewed your service record, your psychological profile, and your genetic compatibility assessments. On paper, you are spectacularly unqualified to marry my daughter." "Yes, sir. I'm aware of that. And yet Lydia speaks of you with genuine affection, which is more than I can say for any of her other suitors." The Emperor's expression grew thoughtful. "Tell me, Lieutenant, what do you believe you can offer the celestial dominion that your competitors cannot?" Marcus felt the weight of the question, knowing that his answer would determine whether he had any real chance in the upcoming competition. He could try to match the strategic advantages offered by his competitors, or he could tell the truth. "Nothing, Your Majesty," he said finally. Emperor Zephin raised an eyebrow. "Nothing? I can't offer military alliances like Warlord Zethrak. I can't provide computational resources like Synthesis Unit Omega-7. I can't bring trade agreements like Director Webb." Marcus straightened his shoulders. "But I can offer Princess Lydia something I don't think the others can, a partnership based on choice rather than advantage." "Explain." "Your Majesty, every decision Princess Lydia has ever made has been evaluated for its political implications. Every friendship, every interest, every conversation has been filtered through strategic considerations." Marcus looked at Princess Lydia, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I can offer her the experience of being valued for who she is rather than what she represents. The Imperial flagship sovereigns will materialize in normal space with the kind of dramatic flair that announced the arrival of someone accustomed to reshaping star systems through sheer force of personality." Marcus stood at the observation deck's viewport beside Princess Lydia, watching the massive vessels approach while trying to ignore the fact that her father was about to personally evaluate his worthiness to marry into galactic royalty. "He's not as intimidating as he looks," Princess Lydia said softly, though her ears were flattened against her head in what Marcus had learned was a celestial anxiety response. "Your Highness, that ship has enough firepower to sterilize a small moon," Marcus observed. "How intimidating does he look?" "Point taken." She glanced at him with something that might have been sympathy. "Marcus, I should probably mention that father tends to test people he's considering allowing into the family." "What kind of tests?" "The traditional trials include solving multidimensional tactical problems under telepathic pressure, demonstrating combat worthiness with exotic energy weapons, and proving genetic compatibility through biochemical analysis." Princess Lydia paused. "He may also ask you to recite the genealogy of the royal bloodline going back 17 generations." Marcus stared at her. 17 generations? In Celestial and Standard Galactic. With proper pronunciation of all ceremonial titles. Her expression grew apologetic. "I did mention that royal courtship was complicated. You mentioned it was strategic. You didn't mention it required memorizing your entire family tree or fighting with weapons that don't exist in human space. To be fair, Warlord Zethrak and Director Webb will face the same challenges." Princess Lydia brightened slightly. Though Synthesis Unit Omega-7 has probably already downloaded the complete historical records and calculated optimal combat algorithms. Great. I'm competing with a walking computer. A very polite walking computer with excellent manners and absolutely no sense of humor. Princess Lydia's tone suggested this was a significant character flaw. During our formal introduction, I asked what it found amusing about consciousness, and it spent 47 minutes explaining the statistical improbabilities of organic neural development. Marcus couldn't help but grin. Did you find that amusing? I found it educational. There's a difference. She looked at him with those violet eyes that had gotten him into this situation in the first place. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Of course. Why are you doing this? Competing for royal courtship, I mean. You could withdraw your petition at any time and return to your normal life. No one would blame you for deciding this is too complicated. Marcus considered the question seriously. Over the past week, he'd asked himself the same thing multiple times. The rational answer was that he should withdraw immediately, before he embarrassed himself in front of galactic dignitaries and potentially damaged human-celestial relations. Honestly, he said finally. Because when you said, I wish, in engineering, you looked like someone who'd never been allowed to wish for anything before. And I realized that if I walked away, you'd end up marrying someone who sees you as a political asset rather than. He trailed off, searching for the right words. Rather than what? Rather than the woman who gets so excited about quantum mechanics that she forgets she's not supposed to disassemble starship engines. Rather than someone who asks thoughtful questions about human culture because she's genuinely curious about how other people live. Marcus met her gaze. Rather than someone worth choosing. The imperial court chamber aboard sovereigns will defy several architectural principles Marcus thought were universal, featuring walls that curved through dimensions his brain couldn't quite process and seating arrangements that somehow allowed everyone to face the center simultaneously despite the geometric impossibility. Emperor Zephan sat on a throne that seemed to be carved from crystallized light, while Princess Lydia occupied a smaller chair at his right hand, wearing formal court regalia that made her look both regal and utterly unreachable. Marcus stood with the other suitors in what he assumed was the defendant's area, though the celestial term probably translated to something more dignified. Warlord Zethrak loomed beside him, 7 feet of scarred muscle and barely contained violence wrapped in ceremonial armor that could probably stop a plasma cannon. Director Webb looked like he'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom, his expensive suit somehow managing to convey both wealth and ruthless efficiency. Synthesis Unit Omega-7 appeared as a humanoid figure of polished metal and contained energy, its optical sensors tracking everything with computational precision. Honored suitors, Emperor Zephan began, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the chamber's impossible architecture. You have come to seek the hand of my daughter, Princess Lydia Vexhara, heir to the celestial dominion. The trials you are about to face will determine not only your worthiness, but your compatibility with the sacred responsibilities of royal partnership. Your Imperial Majesty, Director Webb stepped forward with practiced confidence. The Human Corporate Consortium has prepared detailed proposals outlining the economic advantages our alliance would bring to the Dominion. Perhaps we might begin with a review of the projected trade benefits. Director Webb, Princess Lydia interjected smoothly, while I'm sure your economic analyses are thorough, I was hoping we might start with something more personal. Her violet eyes held a hint of mischief that Marcus was learning to recognize as dangerous. Perhaps each suitor could explain what they find most fascinating about consciousness. Synthesis Unit Omega-7 immediately began accessing data banks. Princess Lydia, consciousness can be defined as the state of being aware of and able to think about one's existence, sensations, thoughts, and surroundings. The fascinating aspects include the emergence of self-awareness from complex neural networks, the hard problem of qualia, and the potential for consciousness transfer between organic and synthetic substrates. Thank you, Synthesis Unit, Princess Lydia interrupted gently. That was very comprehensive. Warlord Zethrak. The Zephyrian warrior looked uncomfortable with the philosophical question. Consciousness is the fire that burns within warriors. It is what separates the living from the dead, the strong from the weak. A warrior's consciousness must be sharp as a blade and unyielding as stellar iron. Poetic, Princess Lydia acknowledged. Director Webb. Consciousness represents the ultimate market force, individual decision-making capacity that drives economic systems and creates value through choice optimization. Webb's answer sounded like it had been prepared by a committee. Understanding consciousness allows for more effective consumer behavior prediction and resource allocation strategies. All eyes turned to Marcus, who realized he was expected to provide something profound about the nature of consciousness while standing next to individuals who commanded fleets, controlled galactic economies, and could probably calculate the meaning of existence to 17 decimal places. I think consciousness is what makes us curious, he said finally. It's not just being aware, it's wanting to understand things we don't need to understand, asking questions that don't have practical answers, caring about people we've never met. He looked directly at Princess Lydia. It's what makes someone want to learn about quantum mechanics even though they're never going to build a starship, or what makes them wonder how other species experience humor. Princess Lydia smiled, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her since the formal proceedings began. Interesting perspectives, all. Now, for the traditional trials. What followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in 8 years of military service. The telepathic compatibility test involved Princess Lydia establishing temporary mental connections with each suitor, sharing memories and emotions to determine psychological harmony. When it was Marcus's turn, he found himself experiencing Princess Lydia's consciousness from the inside, her loneliness, her intelligence, her desperate desire for genuine connection, her fear that no one would ever see past her political value. But more startling was what he felt through their connection, Princess Lydia experiencing his memories of their conversations, his admiration for her curiosity, his complete lack of interest in her strategic worth, his growing affection for the person behind the princess facade. Through the neural link, he felt her surprise at discovering someone who genuinely liked her for reasons that had nothing to do with power or status. The combat trial with exotic energy weapons went about as badly as Marcus had expected, though he managed not to accidentally vaporize himself or any important court officials. Warlord Zethrak dominated the competition with techniques that looked like elaborate death poetry, while Synthesis Unit Omega-7 calculated optimal combat algorithms in real time. Director Webb, surprisingly, demonstrated competent marksmanship that suggested his corporate success hadn't made him soft. Marcus's performance was technically adequate but thoroughly outclassed. However, when Princess Lydia briefly joined the neural link during his combat demonstration, he found himself accessing combat techniques that definitely hadn't been part of his training, ancient celestial martial arts flowing through their shared connection. Acceptable adaptation to royal combat bonding, Emperor Zephan noted with what might have been approval. The genetic compatibility analysis involved complex biochemical tests that Marcus didn't understand but which apparently determined his ability to survive the permanent neural bonding that celestial marriages required. The results were mixed. Lieutenant Rivera's neural architecture is compatible with royal bonding protocols, the court physician announced, though integration would require significant adaptation periods for both participants. Meaning? Emperor Zephan inquired. Meaning the bonding would work, but it would fundamentally change both consciousness patterns involved. The lieutenant would gain access to royal collective memory, while Princess Lydia would experience human emotional processing methods that could alter her decision-making patterns. Marcus felt a chill. Would we still be ourselves? You would be enhanced versions of yourselves, the physician explained. Individual identity remains intact, but personality integration creates hybrid consciousness patterns that combine the best qualities of both participants. And the risks? Bonding between significantly different species can create psychological instabilities. In rare cases, consciousness integration failure results in complete mental breakdown for both participants. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled. Marcus realized he was being asked to risk not just his life, but his fundamental identity, for a relationship with someone he'd known for exactly 2 weeks. I have heard enough, Emperor Zephan declared. Each suitor has demonstrated competence in the traditional areas. However, this decision ultimately rests with my daughter. He turned to Princess Lydia. Choose. Princess Lydia stood, her court regalia somehow making her appear both imperial and vulnerable. Father, honored court, this decision will affect not only my personal happiness but the political future of 17 star systems. I have therefore chosen to base it on a simple principle: I will marry the suitor who sees me as a partner rather than an acquisition. She walked to stand before each suitor in turn. Director Webb, you offer economic prosperity, but your projections treat me as a variable in profit calculations rather than a person with individual agency. Warlord Zethrak, you promise military strength, but your culture views marriage as conquest rather than cooperation. Synthesis Unit Omega-7, you provide computational precision, but you analyze love as statistical probability rather than emotional reality. Finally, she stopped in front of Marcus. Lieutenant Rivera, you offer no strategic advantages, no economic benefits, no military alliances. What you offer is partnership, the possibility of building something together rather than simply acquiring something valuable. Marcus felt the weight of every gaze in the chamber. Your Highness, are you certain? Your other suitors can offer the dominion advantages I can't even comprehend. Marcus, Princess Lydia said softly, using his first name in formal court for the first time, in 2 weeks, you've shown me more genuine respect and affection than I've received in 25 years of diplomatic relationships. You've asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I needed. You've treated me like a person worth knowing rather than a prize worth winning. She turned to address the entire court. I choose Lieutenant Marcus Rivera as my partner, not because of what he can provide the Dominion, but because of who he is when no one is calculating strategic advantage. Emperor Zephan was quiet for a long moment. Daughter, you understand the risks. Consciousness bonding with a human will change you both in ways that cannot be predicted or undone. I understand, Father. But I would rather face uncertain change with someone who values my happiness than accept predictable advantage with someone who values my utility. And you, Lieutenant? Emperor Zephan's attention fixed on Marcus. Are you prepared to link your consciousness permanently with my daughter's? To accept responsibility for helping guide an interstellar civilization? To risk everything you are for the possibility of becoming something more? Marcus looked at Princess Lydia, seeing past the royal regalia to the brilliant, lonely woman who'd spent her life having her choices made for her. The woman who got excited about quantum mechanics and asked thoughtful questions about human culture and had said, I wish, with such quiet longing that it had changed the trajectory of his entire existence. Your Imperial Majesty, Marcus said formally, I choose Princess Lydia not because of her political position, but because she's the most genuinely curious, intellectually fascinating, and personally courageous person I've ever met. If she's willing to risk consciousness bonding with me, I'm willing to risk everything to be worthy of that trust. Then it is decided, Emperor Zephan declared. Prepare for the bonding ceremony. 3 hours later, Marcus stood in the imperial bonding chamber, wearing ceremonial robes that seemed to be woven from crystallized starlight. Princess Lydia faced him across a platform covered in quantum field generators that hummed with energies he couldn't identify. Are you ready? She asked, her voice carrying harmonics of nervousness and anticipation. Probably not, Marcus admitted. But I'm ready to try. The bonding process felt like dissolving and reforming simultaneously. Marcus's consciousness expanded beyond individual boundaries, flowing into connection with Princess Lydia's mind, her memories, her accumulated experiences. But instead of losing himself, he found himself becoming more, his human curiosity merging with her celestial wisdom, his practical problem-solving combining with her theoretical knowledge. Through their shared awareness, he felt Princess Lydia experiencing his memories. His genuine delight in her intelligence, his complete disinterest in her political value, his growing love for the person she was rather than the position she held. And he felt her relief, her joy, her amazement at being truly known and chosen for herself. When the process completed, they were still themselves, but enhanced, connected, part of something larger than either could have been alone. How do you feel? Princess Lydia asked, though through their bond, she already knew the answer. Different. Better. Like I've been waiting my entire life to become who I actually am. Marcus took her hands, marveling at the way their shared consciousness made every touch resonate with emotional harmonics. And you? Complete, she said simply. For the first time in my life, complete. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same observation deck where this had all begun, watching Princess Lydia, now officially Queen Lydia following her father's voluntary abdication, negotiate a trade agreement between 3 species that had been enemies for centuries. Their consciousness bonding had indeed changed both of them, giving her access to human adaptability and intuitive problem-solving while providing him with celestial wisdom and theoretical knowledge that made him an effective diplomatic partner. Their marriage had created exactly the kind of political advantages her other suitors had promised, but through cooperation rather than acquisition. The human-celestial alliance had stabilized 3 different border conflicts, while their combined perspectives had led to technological innovations that benefited both species. Regrets? Queen Lydia asked through their mental connection, not pausing in her negotiations but sharing her attention between diplomatic complexities and personal curiosity. Only one, Marcus replied the same way. Which is? I wish I'd proposed seriously the first time instead of as a joke. We could have saved everyone a lot of diplomatic complications. Her laughter resonated through their bond, bright and joyful and free. Marcus Rivera, you proposed exactly when and how you were supposed to. If you'd been serious, I would have given you the polite diplomatic deflection I'd been trained to provide. If you'd calculated the political implications, you never would have asked at all. So cosmic timing. So perfect timing. The universe apparently has a sense of humor about how people find each other. Through their shared consciousness, Marcus felt her contentment, her joy in their partnership, her amazement that a casual joke had led to the deepest connection either of them had ever experienced. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient courses, witness to a marriage that had begun with accidental proposal and evolved into the kind of partnership that reshaped both individuals and civilizations. And in the quantum foam between dimensions, reality made a sound that might have been cosmic satisfaction at a joke well told.